Pontarddulais Comprehensive School, GCSE History, USA, A Nation of Contrasts, 1910 to 1929, Lesson 1. What I'd like you to do to start today's lesson is to look at these four images and see what you can see that they have in common. So have a think about if there's any themes, anything you can notice that has a link between these four images. Now, the theme that you should have got for these four images is that of immigration. So today's lesson is all going to be about why people migrated to America in the 19th and 20th century. So what you're going to be learning about is immigration and why migrants want to move to America. How you will be doing it is via the card sorting activity, where you will sort out factors about why people were attracted to America into two categories, and why we're doing it is to understand the different mix of cultures in America and why this caused friction. So, America today is seen as a multicultural society. This means that there's lots of different groups of people living within America from different countries, different cultures, different beliefs, etc. And this is mostly due to the wave of immigrants who emigrated to America from Europe. Over 40 million people arrived between 1850 and 1919 during the late 1800s and early 1900s. This immigration was encouraged by the American government. They wanted people to come to America, partly due to a belief in something called manifest destiny, where the belief held by the American government is that they needed to fill the lands of America, these vast lands that had Native Americans, or used to be called Indians, living there, and they felt that it was a white person's job to take over this land and to control this land. They were keen to raise the population of America and make the country stronger. They wanted to make entry into the country as easy as possible for these people from Europe. This was called the open door policy. Now, in your document that you should have opened, can you please write down a definition of your understanding of the term open door policy? We're going to focus just briefly on the experience of the immigrants when they arrived in America. We don't necessarily need to know that much detail for the exam. However, I do think it's useful in giving you a bit of contextual knowledge on sort of experience of the migrant in America. So after the ship had docked, the immigrants were put on a ferry to Ellis Island in New York. And more than 12 million immigrants passed through Ellis Island between 1892 and 1954. Now, upon arrival at Ellis Island, the immigrants were placed into an inspection hall, and the migrants had experienced a difficult journey. Often these people weren't the first-class passengers that you would have seen in the film Titanic and at the start of the lesson with the image of Rose, but they were much more likely to be the likes of Jack, the working-class people who had saved up all their money to travel and had spent 2 weeks in cramped accommodation with little or no privacy. When they arrived at Ellis Island, they were placed into queues for inspection, and this would decide if they were allowed into the USA. The reason why they were queuing is that they would have medical tests carried out on them by doctors looking for what they deemed at the time mental or physical abnormalities, and they would chalk immigrants with an X for mental illness, for example, H if there was some sort of heart problem, and immigrants were also checked for contagious diseases, which you can see trachoma was one of them, which is a condition that affects the eye. Many were held for days or weeks, but only 2% of those travelling from Europe were denied entry. One of the major groups that would have been denied entry would have been young single women. This was because they would be seen as unable to support themselves when they got to America, as there wasn't many places of employment for young single women, and the Americans were fearful that these women would then lead a life of crime by carrying out prostitution, for example. Now, the first view that many Americans got of their new homeland was that of the Statue of Liberty. Upon the bottom of the Statue of Liberty, inscribed is a poem. It says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe thee, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these the homeless tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." What I would like you to do now is, in your document that you're working on, which is in a PowerPoint format at the moment, I'd like you to tell me why people moved to America based off that poem. What reasons can you think of? Now, from the poem we've just looked at, there are a number of reasons why people moved to America. For example, it mentions the fact that people were homeless, so that suggests they had nowhere to live, or the swarming masses suggesting overpopulation. They talk about the poor, so maybe they're seeking opportunities in America to become rich. So you've got a number of different reasons down why people move to America. And when we look at the reasons why people move to America, they can be split into two distinct categories. Have a look at this image that's in front of you. You've got two images there, and I'd like you to tell me what you think these two categories might be. The previous slide had two images, and these were push factors and pull factors. So these two categories are how we decide on the reasons why people move to America. Between 1850 and 1914, over 40 million people left Europe for a new life in America, making it the biggest movement of people in history. A combination of push and pull factors caused this mass migration. The push factors were those that forced the immigrants to leave their homeland, so there's a reason why they were pushed out of their homelands, for example, while the pull factors were those that attracted them to the United States. Now, your next task for task 3 is to actually create a table and put them into the factors of were they push or pull factors. So as you can see here, I've got a range of reasons why people left the USA, why they migrated, to the USA. They left Europe to go to the USA. They're split, as you can see here, into 8 different factors. And these are overcrowding in Europe, plenty of food in the USA, the persecution of Russian Jews, poverty in Europe, the US Bill of Rights, higher pay for US worker, the European class system, religious freedom in the US. So I just want to briefly touch upon some of these. So the population in Europe had been steadily rising due to the Industrial Revolution, and historically people had stayed within their own small village towns and had worked on the land, but now we're seeing the development of cities. These are starting to become overcrowded, and there's a lack of space in Europe at this time. Another factor to touch upon is the US Bill of Rights, which gave freedoms for many people in America that didn't apply in Europe. So a lot of the freedoms that they had in America didn't apply in Europe at this time. There was no equivalent Bill of Rights, or as we have today, sort of a Human Rights Act. Those didn't exist in the early 20th century. Also, in Europe, they had the European class system. This still existed, where you would have the lower, middle, and upper class. Historically, throughout Europe, there had always been the upper and lower class, where you had the lower class workers, which would probably be about 95% of the population, who would work the land and were tied to the land, as they often rented this land from a member of the upper class, who would be a lord, for example, in England. During the Industrial Revolution, more and more people started to move away from being working class or the lower classes, as things like factory owners started to earn money. You then had managers, you started to see the development of teachers, doctors, and these were then the middle classes who were established. But it's very hard to move out of these classes in certain countries. Russia, in particular, it was very difficult to gain your sort of freedom as a person. So this was something that existed in Europe but didn't exist in America. And finally, religious freedom. The USA, the founding fathers who came to America, they found what we call America today. They left Europe for religious reasons. They wanted to be able to worship freely as Christians and as Protestant Christians, which is very different to what much of Europe was experiencing at this time. So in America, there was this belief that there was religious freedom. So hopefully your table will look something like this. So you've got the push factors, overcrowding in Europe, so there are people that wanted to leave because there's too many people in Europe this time. In Russia, the Jewish people were being persecuted. There was a pogrom, so they were leaving for religious reasons. They were being pushed out of Russia and looking for somewhere to go. Europe, there was a lot of poverty, and people were looking to leave the poor lifestyle behind, so they were being pushed out of Europe as a result of that. And the European class system, people thought they were never going to advance in life and change their social status, so they were looking to get out of Europe and to go somewhere else. What attracted them and pulled them into America is there's plenty of food available in the USA. There was lots of natural resources, for example, so there was lots of places to grow crops, etc. The US Bill of Rights granted certain rights and freedoms that weren't guaranteed in Europe. The workers in the USA, because the American government was trying to build and develop America at this time, there was lots of job opportunities available for migrant workers, and they could get higher wages and they would get equivalent back in Europe. And America, there was the belief that there was religious freedom and people would be free to worship as they liked. For task 4 now, I'd like you to expand on this mind map that you have in front of you, which talks about why people were pushed to leave Europe. So lack of opportunity, overcrowding in Europe, unemployment, persecution. And I'd like you just to click in the speech bubbles as you've got on your PowerPoint, and you can add the detail then as you see fit. For task 5, I'd like you to do exactly the same, but now we're looking at what pulled people into America. It was seen as this land of the free. Think about how, economic opportunities, wages, the space we talked about. Why would all these things pull people from Europe and into America? So, to conclude today's lesson, I'd just like us to touch upon what we talked about at the start of the lesson, where we said you should now have an idea about immigration and why migrants wanted to move to America. You should have all completed some sort of sorting activity to decide what the factors were, push and pull, and you should understand how there became a different mix of cultures in America, and we're going to look at how this leads to some friction further down the line in future lessons. Any questions, any queries, please get in touch with me via email. Hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. Thank you very much.